All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Rebecca Kase. Rebecca, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Hey. So Rebecca founded her training and consultation practice in 2017. A longtime practitioner of EMDR therapy and a professional educator, Rebecca recognized that there was room to improve on training and continuing education for therapists. Through her business, she set out to create thorough and thoughtfully designed educational experiences and a welcome, inclusive community for EMDR learners and trainers. Rebecca, welcome once again.
Hello. Thanks so much.
Hey.
Glad to be here.
So before we get going, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Yeah, where I'm from originally is a little rural town outside of St. Louis, Missouri. And then I moved to Denver. I lived in Denver for 16 years. And I now live on Fox Island, Washington, which is a part of Gig Harbor, Washington, outside of Tacoma.
Oh, wow. Cool. All right. Well, let's get going here. How the heck did you get into this field? How did all this start for you?
Yeah, I feel a little bit like some of it's in my blood, in my DNA. My great-grandfather was a psychiatrist and was supposedly pen pals with Freud. And when he passed away, he left his house to my mom. And so all of his old journals and psychotherapy and psychiatry books and his writings, his research, all of that was there. And so I grew up with these really interesting, kind of strange books on my library shelves in my living room. You know, things like hysterical women and how syphilis impacts our mental health. And he did a lot of research on how carbon monoxide impacts our mental health, carbon dioxide, and also on how Lyme disease impacts our mental health. Really strange stuff, right? So I was kind of exploring these books on my shelf as I was growing up, and it always kind of piqued my interest. And then I went to grad school, or I went to undergrad rather, and the first time I took a psychology, that Psych 101 class, I was just like, this is it. Oh my gosh, this is fascinating. You know, something inside just really lit up. So I got my undergrad in psych, went on to get my master's in social work. And while I was in my MSW program, I got really interested in trauma work because of my own trauma history and also just really learning and recognizing the power of the human spirit to overcome the resiliency that our nervous system offers us. It's really awe-inspiring, right? So I went on to get my master's with a focus in trauma therapy. And when I was in grad school, I went to grad school 2005 to 2007. I learned a little bit about EMDR, although back then it was not evidence-based. It was considered pretty controversial and a strange therapy at the time. But I had a supervisor who was trained in it and just raved about it. So I actually started my EMDR training when I was still in grad school. Just very impressionable and was open to trying anything new and that would help my clients, and fell in love with EMDR then and have been practicing ever since.
Let me ask you something. You mentioned your trauma history. Obviously, you don't have to go in detail, but what was it, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, and I don't mind sharing some of this. I recently did an article with U.S. News and World Report in which I did share some of this because I think that it's important for therapists to recognize it's okay to have your own stuff. And most of us are drawn to this field because of that, right? Like that's why we're here. That's why we do this. But yet we're kind of taught that needs to be compartmentalized and we don't talk about that. But my own trauma history, I won't include all of it, but I was sexually assaulted when I was in college, when I was in undergrad, and had kind of the stereotypical textbook response to that. Were you drinking? What were you wearing? Nobody's going to believe you. And tried to prosecute my perpetrator, but was really talked out of it by the legal system and was told, you're going to have to drop out of school. Your name's going to be dragged through court. You're probably not going to win. And so I dropped it. And I went on to develop a lot of physical health issues from that. I had a couple of surgeries. I had a number of ovarian cysts. I ended up having to have one of my ovaries removed. Got pneumonia. I just got really, really sick after I kind of gave up on being able to pursue that and kind of shut that down and held that in my body, as we know as trauma therapists we do. And then one of my biggest traumas actually happened a couple of years ago when some really terrible stuff happened with my father, who I was very close to. I had a very close-knit family growing up. My parents were married for 40 years, and I caught my father in doing something very, very harmful to someone else. I won't go into all of those details here to respect other people's privacy, but I caught him and confronted it and reported what I found to the police, and that led to what turned out to be the most traumatic experience of my life, where my family of origin completely fell apart. My mom divorced my father, and it was huge betrayal trauma. And he was facing 15 years in prison as an outcome of all of that. And he ended his life by suicide the day before his sentencing in 2019. So all of my knowledge of trauma work served me significantly as I navigated that. It felt like a lifetime kind of movie, honestly.
First of all, thank you. Appreciate you sharing that. How cognizant of your trauma were you when you moved into studying psychology and seeing yourself as a therapist?
I was not fully cognizant of my trauma when I started my pursuit of this degree. I think a lot of us are not. Like, that's kind of what a lot of trauma is, right? Like, oh, wait, that's me. Oh, wait, that's that. Oh, this diagnosis completely explains me. I didn't put all that together. I mean, I don't even think while I was getting my master's in social work did I even recognize that. I don't think I put all of that together until much later, after I was licensed, and I mean, the pieces still kind of come together for me. And it's interesting how we can live through it and be, I can write a book on this. I know all this. I teach clients about this, but yet we feel so disconnected from, oh, wait, oh yeah, that happened to me. And that's why I was the way I was.
Mm-hmm. How did that come together for you? When did you come to certain realizations? And I realize it's not a light switch, but were there certain therapists who help you facilitate that?
Yeah, there have been a number of healers in my life, whether those have been psychotherapists or, other healers I've experienced along the way, from Reiki and energy work and yoga teachers and things like that helped me really put it together. I think a lot of things really came together for me, actually, from everything that happened with my father. Mm-hmm. So when I was going through what happened with my father, happened over a couple of years. It was a slow car crash kind of situation. And in that time, I all of a sudden became very aware of how my past, how my personal experiences and my professional training all came together to help me do what I did in that moment and confront him and stop him from harming other people. And it was really through that process that I felt completely spiritually cracked open. I put a lot of pieces together, and all of a sudden, all these things that had happened in my life made a lot of sense as to why they might have happened to me, what I gained from that, how I learned from that. Mary Oliver has this poem. It's called Box of Darkness. And to shorten it, she says, essentially, someone I loved very much once gave me a box of darkness. And it took me years until I realized that that too was a gift. And that's very much part of my process when I came to recognize, oh, these things are considered traumatic. They were highly stressful for my nervous system and they significantly impacted me. But I did my work and I learned a lot from them. And I see now that in some way they have been gifts because of how they challenged me to grow.
Mm-hmm. How did things evolve and unfold such that you started creating your own programs, your own training programs?
Yeah. So I run a EMDR training and consulting business, and I started my own business in 2017. I'm also a trained yoga instructor, so you probably hear some of that spirituality and how I speak and how I make sense of things. And the way that my training business started felt very, very serendipitous, very much like the universe said, this is the next step for you. One of my colleagues in the Denver area who was an EMDR trainer was retiring, and she sold her training program to me. And it was kind of beyond my wildest dreams. I had never necessarily envisioned myself owning a training business like I do today, but it was very much a situation of the universe saying, go this way now. Mm-hmm. And so I did. And I expected to just be a very small training business, just a one-woman show. And the universe had other plans because we're a very large training group now. But what has always been at the center of my belief system and how I believe in running EMDR trainings and just professional learning spaces for clinicians is, one, I believe we have a mantra in my training business that is create shame-free spaces for learning. Because what we know from polyvagal theory, what we know from our study of neurobiology is that shame is not a helpful emotion. It's not a helpful experience. And it's certainly not helpful when we're trying to learn and grow. And I find so often that the academic world of psychotherapy, of psychology, is really disembodied from what we know to be true about how people best learn, about the importance of safety, about the importance of connection. And I have had too many experiences myself professionally in which I felt too vulnerable or shamed or ridiculed or just unsafe in a professional training space to ask questions or to make mistakes. And I think that most of us have experiences in our professional training career where we can think of a time we've been shamed by a supervisor or a colleague or somebody with power and control over us, and it probably didn't really aid us or help us in our growth and learning. So I really believe in creating shame-free spaces for clinicians to learn the tools to aid in healing the nervous system, because in EMDR training, you actually have to practice EMDR with each other. There's so much vulnerability. I'm learning this new thing and I'm practicing with people I don't know, and people are watching me that I don't know. Mm-hmm. So scary. So that's been such a cornerstone for me. And one of the other pieces that I believe is creating engaging environments. So often academic trainings are just dull and boring and stale and not very interesting or funny, or right. Like, we're talking about heavy stuff when we go to trauma trainings. We're talking about trauma. It's heavy enough. Right. And I think all trauma therapists understand the value of dark humor, finding laughter, finding play in our work. Play is healing. It's a way to connect to that ventral circuit, the window of tolerance. And so I also very much believed in creating engaging environments where people can play and laugh and have fun with some really heavy material. I believe that that is how we best learn. And so that's really been some of my secret sauce, I would say, to building my training business. And it's the reason that we have such a huge community and a huge following.
When you first started, when you first said, yes, all right, I'm going to create this business, this company, how far along were you in your own experience as an EMDR practitioner?
Yeah. So, I mean, at that point, I was an EMDR consultant. I had been consulting for a number of years. So I had credentials where I could be my own trainer. And I had also been volunteering with a nonprofit organization. Their name is Trauma Recovery HAP. They're a great group. Highly recommend checking them out if you are in the EMDR world. And so I had been facilitating trainings with them and had actually started as a trainer for them. So they had also brought me on to train trainings. So it felt very much aligned with, this is the natural next step if you want to take this career further.
It's interesting to hear you kind of outline the differentiators in your business. I kind of appreciate that. When you said the psychology world or psychology educational world, more specifically, is disembodied. Talk more about that.
I find that more often than not, we are sitting in places where we're looking to this expert, this guru in the field, somebody who knows a whole lot, who is teaching us in a way that doesn't embrace what they preach. I believe you got to talk the talk and walk the walk. I believe you got to, be your message.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have too often found experts talking about this is how you heal trauma, but they do it in a way that misses the importance of human connection, that misses the importance of play, that misses the importance of embracing curiosity. And maybe they model poor boundaries, poor self-care, all the things that we teach our clients, like you got to take care of yourself. It's important to set boundaries. It's important to be curious. It's important to find awe and inspiration in the world. Like all of these we know to be really important components to healing. They're all medicinal experiences for our nervous system to be our best. And so it just feels so confusing that the academic world can often feel so unsafe. As someone who is in the academic world a lot, it feels really unsafe. There's a lot of big egos. There's a lot of challenging perspectives and thinking. And if it's not written down or researched out the wazoo, then let's not even talk about it, which research is important, but we also need to recognize the impact of white supremacy in our research paradigm, an evidence-based paradigm of who hasn't been at the table, whose techniques haven't been able to be researched, right? And I think a lot of people can resonate with that, with what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's everybody in the academic world, of course not, but I found that too often it is what you find, individuals who talk the talk but don't really walk the walk, who you say they know a lot, but I don't necessarily want to be them. Right. I'm not necessarily personally inspired by them. Right. And so I'm looking for the people who not only talk the talk, but walk the walk and model their message.
Who does that for you?
Who does that for me? I have a couple of yoga instructors in my life who do that for me. Robin Shapiro, who I really love in the EMDR world. She definitely does that for me. Yeah, I really adore her. One of my graduate professors does that for me. And honestly, my whole team, my community, like this business that I've built, the people who follow us and the folks who work for me, because I set the precedence of like, this is how we be. This is how we show up. And I get inspired by them the most.
Let me just remind everyone that I'm speaking with Rebecca Kase. Let me just see here. Your company is called Kase and Company, Training and Consulting.
Kase and Co.
Kaseandco.com. So you said your company and the work you do kind of embodies embodiment in a sense, this congruency. How specifically do you do that in your trainings? What does that look like?
Yeah. So in our trainings, we have some secret sauce that I won't share all of that here, but we have some specific expectations for those who are conducting trainings, whether that's me or someone else on my faculty, for, how much learning time versus how much play time we bring in. We always bring in play. We bring in humor. We bring in a lot of authenticity and relatability. Everybody on the training team, when we're coaching and supporting others, we always share our misses and our hard learns and how I know you're afraid of breaking your client, which is such a common thing when we learn EMDR. Let me tell you about some of my experiences and some of the hard lessons I've learned, right? We bring in music, we play games. So we do a lot of things to create a really dynamic space to mix up the content. So you're not just sitting here listening to somebody lecture for the whole time. And we create a lot of connection. We create lots of opportunities to connect where there's, often you go to trainings online or even in person and you're not really connecting with anyone. And we find ways to build connection and community. And just to share, Kase and Co, the Co isn't for company. The Co is actually for community.
Okay, got it. What do you see in terms of the current state of education for people in the trauma field?
Hmm. Well, I think back to if I compare to when I started my work as a trauma therapist, I think that we are blessed with having a lot more knowledge and awareness of trauma, right? It used to be when I went to school, I had a specialty certificate and track that I could take to be a trauma expert. And while I wouldn't say that all therapists consider themselves to be experts in trauma, I think pretty much all therapists now have some knowledge or understanding of this is what trauma is. Everybody on my caseload has it, right? And here's some things I need to know about how to treat it. I do feel that we are becoming a bit more aligned with the nervous system, and I really embrace polyvagal theory and EMDR. I have a book coming out in May with Norton called Polyvagal Informed EMDR that's all about how to integrate polyvagal theory into the 8 phases of EMDR therapy. And I believe that that is a neuro-informed approach to therapy. And when I say neuro-informed, it's really about focusing on the nervous system as the focus of assessment, intervention, and outcome. Because as therapists, what do we treat? We treat the nervous system, right? That is the focus of our work. All clinical symptoms, distress or happiness and peace and wellness can all be understood through functions of the nervous system, how well or not well it's functioning. And I feel that we're becoming a bit more aligned with neuro-informed counseling approaches, with more and more folks understanding the importance of understanding on some level how the brain functions and how the nervous system functions. And I think that that really gets us to the heart of the matter. That's what we're treating. But I still think that we have a long way to go in the academic field in regards to, I think training content is wonderful a lot of times. A lot of people put on amazing trainings with wonderful content, but I think it's important that we also focus on the delivery of it and how you focus on the interpersonal process in training. As we know as therapists, the number one most important variable for good therapeutic outcomes, the relationship. So I believe that should be a parallel process in some way, shape, and form in trainings.
And when you say that, what do you specifically do you mean? What does that mean to you?
What that means to me is creating academic learning spaces that feel like a container for learning, where you build connection, where you build commonality, where you build empathy, where you build shared experience, instead of I'm going to stand up here and talk to you about how to do this thing. Right? That's not a very engaging experience, and it doesn't engage the power of the nervous system, right? If I'm just sitting here and somebody's just lecturing me and going through slides and just telling me what to do, I'm probably not going to retain a whole lot of that information. But if you bring in more of a dynamic experience where I'm watching videos of you practice, or I hear you talk about your mistakes, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, they're really humble. They're really relatable. I get that, right? You create opportunities for people to get into small groups to discuss material, whatever that may be. How do you build connection? And it can be really hard when you're in huge groups, right? When you have hundreds of people or thousands even at a conference. It may not be as easy or attainable, but it doesn't mean it's not at all. Or if you have smaller groups, it can be easier to do that. But I think that when we fail to do that, we kind of miss what we know to be so true in the counseling process. And while training is not counseling, we're still relying on similar mechanisms of the nervous system to engage and support our learning so we can go out there and actually support our clients in the counseling space.
So how do you work in terms of offering trainings and events? Is it virtual? Is it in person? Both? What?
Yeah, so we do everything virtual at this time. We are open to doing in-person training requests upon request. Before the pandemic, it was all in person, and now we've gone online. We found that that's just been really great for the business, and we can reach more people, because before the pandemic, EMDR training was only allowed to be offered in person, which is really limiting for people who didn't have money to travel, who lived in rural locations, single working parents who don't have childcare. So I believe that virtual training environments, while a lot of us would prefer to be in person, can create a lot more accessibility for individuals. So we do all online trainings. We offer EMDR basic training. We're an EMDRI approved provider, so everything we do is legit. We also offer APA CEs and NBCC CEs. And then we also offer advanced trainings, advanced courses. So we just had an advanced course on EMDR with ego states. We have a training coming up on EMDR with disordered eating. We have a complex PTSD course, grief and loss course, refresher course. We got a lot of courses. We got a whole lot of stuff to offer,
Awesome.
because we want to be a place that people know they can go and get great material, connect to a community. We also offer EMDR certification if folks want to get certified. And we also have a consultant training process for those who want to become an EMDRI approved consultant. We're the only group in the country to offer a package consultant training internship. We offer an internship. So yeah, it's very well organized and packs a lot.
Very cool. Rebecca, what's the best place for people to get in contact with you?
Yeah, the best place to check out my team would be to go to Kase & Co. And my last name is spelled with a K, Kase, kaseandco.com.
Okay.
You can find our whole schedule of events. You can sign up to get our mailers and newsletters and discounts. You can reach out to me or anyone on the faculty there too by finding our contact page.
Awesome. And the book's coming out in May.
In May.
Okay, remind
23rd.
us what the name of that is again.
Polyvagal Informed EMDR, a neuro-informed approach to healing.
Okay.
May 23rd.
Now is
May
that
23rd, 23, actually,
okay.
Yeah.
And is there currently a link up anywhere that people can access, get info about?
Yes, yeah, you can find a link on the website to get connected to Norton and sign up for pre-sale.
Awesome. Rebecca, awesome. Very inspiring what you're doing. I appreciate you being on here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Guy.